Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I think we're ready.
All right.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Margie Yanker. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. This presentation is for CSUS for the cardiac rehabilitation program, and the topic is on carbohydrates. So thank you for joining me, everyone, today. I always enjoy speaking with this group, and let's get started with the presentation. Next slide, please. So especially now when everyone talks about the keto diet and wanting to limit carbohydrates, there's a lot of questions about, are carbohydrates good for me? How much should I have? And so I wanted to go ahead and provide an overview that on some items that may seem basic, at the same time, it's really confusing when we're trying to plan our daily meals or our weekly menu. So carbohydrates are an important part of our diets, and they provide fiber, and they also provide B vitamins and other nutrients that we do not get from other food groups. And so it is important that we have carbohydrates, and also the carbohydrates is the main source of energy. So it's really not carbohydrates in general that are the problem, it's the kind of carbohydrates we have, especially more in a processed food world. So one of the ones that I think we all know is we want to watch is the simple sugars. And that would be like the candy, regular soda, honey, sugar, pastries. This would also include, sodas in there, but people don't often think of some of the other drinks. Even lemonade, for example, can be simple sugars. Sometimes some of even our protein drinks or other drinks that appear healthy, even Gatorade, the first ingredient can be sugar. So it's important that we look at those food labels, and some foods may provide more simple sugars than you may be aware of. So really important to look at those food labels. And the next part of carbohydrates is starches, and that's potatoes, bananas, peas, corn, and yams. Now, in terms of the potatoes and peas and yams, yes, they are vegetables, but they contain such a heavy starch content that in terms of meal planning, they're really considered like in the grain, bread and starch group. So for example, you wouldn't necessarily at a meal want to have a large portion of corn and potatoes, because really they're all starches. And then there are also food containing fiber, which is the vegetables, whole grain, fruit, and beans. Now, one thing that's not here is dairy also has carbohydrates to it, about 12 grams of carbohydrates per serving. And that would be milk or milk products, as well as yogurts or cottage cheese. And some people don't realize that milk, because it's a carbohydrate in liquid form, can rapidly raise blood sugar, equivalent to something like juice. So we don't always think about that. So liquid carbohydrates are going to rapidly raise blood sugar no matter what their form. The next slide. So I think we're aware that the complex carbohydrates are from plants, and those are the best kind. And there's so many out there, so many choices for complex carbohydrates. Especially now, the farmers markets are opening because it's springtime, those that have been closed. We're really fortunate to live in the Sacramento Valley, where, within 3 hours of us, 80% of the country's produce is grown. And that we have so many choices all year round that other people in other parts of the country do not have. The next slide. So again, carbohydrates provide energy for now. So if we've eaten a meal or something with carbohydrates in it, and those carbs are in our bloodstream, if we go for a walk, the carbs in our bloodstream are what's going to go ahead and provide immediate energy. If we don't use those carbohydrates, they're going to be stored in the form of fat, and eventually go to glucose. But glucose can be stored in our liver and also in our muscles and fat tissue. So carbohydrates are also stored for later and can be broken down for fuel as our body needs it. And they also provide essential vitamins and minerals like B vitamins, and most importantly, the fiber. And the recommendations for fiber is 30 grams of fiber per day. Okay, the next one, next slide. So many of us know this, but I think that we forget that fiber is the structural part of plants that is not digested. So an example would be if you have an orange, and if you go ahead and squeeze that orange and you see all of that was left, that's the pulp, or that's the fiber. And amazingly, when that's digested, it kind of goes through our intestines and kind of cleans it out. And so that's why high fiber foods help reduce cancer, because it has a cleansing effect to it. And then also pulls out some of the fat in there too. And that's why soluble fiber helps reduce cholesterol and helps remove it, and can also lower LDL cholesterol and also triglycerides. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions? And someone mentioned, is it possible to mute everyone so it has this background noise? And so it's up to you, Linda. That was a message that I just received. I hear a little bit of background noise also. I like to try and do interactive presentations. So all that I ask is, if you're muted, that if you have a question, just unmute yourself and go ahead and join in.
Yeah, they know how to do that.
Okay, great. Okay, next slide. So also importantly is there's something called the term of prebiotics. Does anyone here know what prebiotics is, or can you describe it? So
pre or probiotics?
So there's prebiotics and there's probiotics. So what's the difference?
A prebiotic is one that supports the gut bacteria, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good. That's a great, yeah, exactly. So this whole realm of healthy gut, it's amazing as we're going with science and going forward, that we think the core of our being, or the core of our immune system, actually lies in the gut. And they think a lot of diseases, from heart disease to cancers, and also to even things like arthritis and pain, can be rooted in unhealthy gut bacteria. And so what you can have is, you can have an overgrowth of an unhealthy gut bacteria, or you can just not have enough healthy gut bacteria. So in order for the healthy gut bacteria to grow, it needs prebiotics. And the prebiotics is that fiber from fruits and vegetables. So when that fiber is digesting in our system, those fibers provide the environments that the healthy bacteria, or the probiotics, get to go ahead and grow on, and that provides your good system. Now, as some of you have known, a few months back, I did a presentation on constipation. I've been having just some imbalances in my gut for over a year now that I've really struggled with. And I went to the Sutter in integrative medicine, and it's terrific there. They're functional medicine doctors. And I did actually do a test where they take in your feces and they check it. And so I did find out the core of the problem for me is I have an overgrowth of bad bacteria and an undergrowth of the good bacteria. And that's what's causing actually pain and discomfort. And it could actually set me up to be at risk for disease. And so what they're doing with that is, I was low in vitamin D, so I'm taking vitamin D, but I needed some digestive enzymes because mine were low. And then I'm taking some assigned probiotics that they recommended, and I've changed some of my diet. And so it's really important in terms of we control our gut health through the fiber and the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And if we have a diet that's high in fats, unhealthy fats, saturated fats, if we take a lot of medicines or a lot of antibiotics, we kind of ruin that balance. And the way to correct that really is healthy eating, if that makes sense. So it's amazing that those fruits and vegetables could really steer our future health. And so then probiotics are healthy bacteria that strengthen your immune system. And the goal is greater than 30 grams of fiber per day. Now, I say that with a caveat that we really need every single day whole grains and fruits and vegetables that all contain carbohydrate. If you're increasing those foods, you want to make sure that you have plenty of water, because if you're constipated, constipation can create an overgrowth of bad bacteria. The longer that those feces stay in your intestines, longer than what's healthy or normal, it just has something to feed on. And then another thing that really the bacteria that's unhealthy, sugar feeds those. So the more processed foods you have, the more white sugar and white flour, the more you can create fuel, or you're actually feeding the bad bacteria. And you want to find a balance. So you want the carbohydrates from whole grains and fruits and vegetables. Are there any questions about that? I think I heard that Deb does a really good presentation on probiotics and prebiotics.
Does it make any difference if it's brown sugar or white sugar or?
It does not, because brown, whether it's, it's processed sugar. So better would be just unprocessed sugar. And then also, if you want a sugar substitute, the best one is the stevia. And I have an organic one that doesn't have anything added. So you look on the label, sometimes they have inulin and other additives to it. You do not want additions. I have one right here at my desk. Let me see if I can show it to you. So this is the one that I use, stevia extract. I don't know if you can see it. There it goes. Yeah, it's organic stevia extract, and there's nothing in here but stevia. But other forms that would be considered whole foods would be honey, maple syrup, and even though they're sweets and they're sugars, they're natural, they're whole foods. So choose foods with more fiber, and your food label is your friend. I hardly even buy anything anymore at the store without looking at the food label. I've been tricked so many times. As a dietitian, I've been tricked. There was some juice and they had beautiful pictures of fruit all over the front of it. And I know better, and I got it home, and the first ingredient was high fructose corn syrup, and it was only 10% juice. And I just missed it on the label, because I just saw the pictures, and the pictures look so beautiful, right? Or I'll grab peanut butter only to find that it has added sugar or it has hydrolyzed oil. So really, unless you know the brands, even some of the healthy foods, if you grab soy milk now or almond milk, turn it over. It's been amazing to me how many fats and sugars have been added to some of those things. And so you want as close to natural as possible. And here on this label, you see under carbohydrates, this has dietary fiber 4 grams. The goal is greater than 3 grams of fiber per serving is considered a whole grain. So you want most, if not all, your grain products to be whole grain. And again, look at the label of what you're purchasing. In terms of the sugars, this particular one has 12 grams of sugar and 10 grams of added sugar, or 20%. So for me, that's a high added sugar product. A lot of the processed foods now, even healthy foods, have added sugars. So just take a look at it. So I don't know, does anyone else here track their food intake on MyFitnessPal? Does anyone do tracking? So some of the food tracking programs track what kind of sugars you take in. And for me, for MyFitnessPal, if I have more than 2 pieces of fruit a day, it says I'm going over on sugar, but that's okay because it's natural sugar, it's not added sugar. Okay, the next slide. So we're talking about consistent carbohydrate diet. Now the handout that I'm sending you, I think that Linda's going to email it out if she has not already. The handout talks about consistent carbohydrate diet, and it really talks about the cardiac diet for patients living with diabetes. I really think that eating consistent carbohydrates are important for all of us, not just people living with diabetes. I think many of us, or many of you, have prediabetes. And in prediabetes, it's the best time to really control your carb intake and really focus on lifestyle management, because you could prevent not only your body progressing to diabetes by lifestyle changes now in prediabetes. The damage from unhealthy blood sugar levels starts in prediabetes. So the damage from microvascular complications for the kidneys and eyes and macrovascular complications for heart disease starts in prediabetes. So if you're pre-diabetic, it's especially important now for you to watch your carbohydrates. So my recommendation is that our body kind of gets used to processing carbs, and you're much better off, instead of having one big meal with a whole bunch of carbohydrates, to go ahead and have it separated out to 3 smaller meals with about equal amounts of carbohydrates. The next slide. And so when you have more consistent carbohydrates, you're regulating your blood sugar. You're not having like these spikes, like you ate a whole bunch of carbs at once, you're going to have a blood sugar spike. Your body has to overproduce insulin to bring that blood sugar down, and then it's going to go down fast. So it regulates blood glucose. It also improves satiety. I have a lot of clients that say, oh, I don't eat breakfast or lunch because I'm trying to lose weight. I find most of those people eat a lot more calories from at dinner and snacking through the night, and have some lack of control around food intake. And part of it is that their body was kind of starving for the day, and now they have this big urge to eat. And also it regulates bowel movements if you have some fiber throughout the whole day. The next slides. So as we already know, we want to eat less of added sugars and candies, baked goods, and then any sources of unhealthy liquid carbs, and watch out for 100% juice, Gatorade, and anything that has liquid carbohydrates can rapidly increase your blood sugar. It could trigger hunger and mood swings, and it's excess calories. The next slide. And so enjoy the delicious foods. There's so many terrific foods for us to choose from. Non-starchy vegetables as one, starchy vegetables, the whole grains, not just wheat bread. It needs to be whole wheat, whole grain, fruit, and also beans and legumes. And the next slide, here we go. And so generally speaking, I recommend about 45 grams of carbohydrates per meal. And that would be the equivalent of like 2 pieces of whole wheat bread and a piece of fruit. That would be 45 grams of carbs. Like a half cup of rice, or like maybe 2/3 cups of rice and a piece of fruit would be 45 grams of carbs. If you track your carb intake, I think you may be shocked at how easy it is to get 100 grams of carbs at one meal. And we do need to watch and not have that much at one time. But your actual needs based on your body weight and height, exercise level. If you exercise more, you burn more fuel, you could eat more carbs. Age, muscle mass, and also what your health goals are if you're trying to lose weight or if you need to lower your blood sugars. The next slide. And so, there you go. Are there any questions about that part?
A couple of minutes ago, you mentioned something about tracking online or something. Can you send the references to Linda so she can share them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And then there's a number of apps now, especially. We find that even if you write your food intake on a piece of paper, people who track are 80% more likely to meet their health goals for weight loss or diet improvement, because they're being more mindful. So one of the sites that I really like is MyFitnessPal, MyFitnesspal.com. I use it for free. You can do for $15 a month without the ads, which is great. There's another one called Calorie Counter. There's one called Carb Counter. There's so many apps for tracking food intake. A newer one on the block right now is Noom, Noom. Noom is actually, it's a weight loss program, And I've heard this, they run specials, so it goes from anywhere from $15 a month to $50 a month. But I know someone who just paid $180 for 8 months, so it was less than $30 a month. So you track your food with Noom, but you also put in your health goals, and a health coach reaches out with you for like daily or as many times a week as you want, and kind of guides you in your goals and gives you encouragement and resources. And there's also recipes on Noom. So that's Noom. And then MyFitnessPal also has really good recipes. And Weight Watchers, so Weight Watchers has tracking where you enter your food in. They go by points. The higher calorie the food choice is, the higher points it's going to be, and the lower calorie will be less points. And you get a set amount of points per day and per week. And they have some float points. So if you want to eat less during the week, so you could eat more on the weekends, you can do that because they have these so many extra points you could have anytime. And you track your food as well. The only difficulty that I have found with Weight Watchers is if you do not have that much weight to lose, Weight Watchers allows you to have as much fruit as you want. And so they don't count fruit. Well, fruit is carbs. And so I just know a lot of people that were closer to their weight goal, like 10 pounds to the weight goal, they just stopped losing weight if they were having unlimited amounts of fruit. So if you are trying to lose weight, we know that we don't do really well on our own. And so committing to some kind of program is the best way to get there.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Are there any other questions?
I'd just like to add about MyFitnessPal. I've used that before in the past. And one of the things that's really great about it is if you have trouble knowing what every single ingredient is in like a recipe you've used, or if you've gotten food from a restaurant or something like that, if you type in like the name of the recipe, if it comes from online, it can automatically figure out what's in that meal. Also, if you are coming from a restaurant and you put in like the restaurant and the name of the dish, same thing. So it's actually pretty painless, even if you don't know exactly offhand what's in that meal.
That's great. Now, do you know how to, and I haven't done this yet with MyFitnessPal, you could also, like, if you make a recipe or if you have a set meal, you could put it in your favorites and then you could just pick it. Do you know how to do that?
I don't. That's not something I've done before.
Yeah, because I think you can do that, but I don't know how. But it's a good program.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found the success with that, Katie. Any other thoughts or comments? So we're going to talk, I think we have time here. We're going to talk about the handout. The handout is from the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and it's on controlled carbohydrate cardiac diet. And if you could pull that up, let's talk through it. I see Elaine's beautiful picture. Elaine, is that Yosemite?
Yes, it is. I took it a few years ago.
Oh, it's really pretty.
Thank you.
Makes me want to go hiking. And Timothy, you also have some nice views, outdoor views.
Yeah, this was actually Castle Peak up near Tahoe.
Oh, pretty, really, really pretty. So we talk about heart health and consistent carbohydrates. So we're really talking about a way that we're eating to protect our heart for kind of treating cardiovascular disease and prevention for future incidents. And then also controlling carbohydrates, which could regulate blood sugars and help with prediabetes and diabetes. It could also help with weight gain. And consistent carbohydrate can also help with being triggered to binge or overeat when we control the way and the kind of carbs that we eat. We really didn't have a problem with some of the issues we're having with carbohydrates before carbohydrates became processed foods. So if you think about it, before the 1950s, before they had all these things, and then I remember as a kid in the 70s, We had rice-a-roni, we had hamburger helper. Does everyone remember those? Those carbs that were given to us, right? Or I grew up on Hostess products. Does anyone else grow up on Twinkies?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yes, I heard someone say, oh yeah.
I did.
Yeah, and so TV dinners, I remember as a kid thinking this was absolutely the best to get my TV dinner, and I thought it was the special treat meal. Now I look back, I think, oh my, nutritionally, but actually for us, that was a special treat that we got to have a TV dinner. And I love that little cherry dessert, like the cherry pie dessert that was in the corner. So yeah, and so it's interesting to me that I look back at my childhood and remember all those processed foods that suddenly became special foods because they were new and the advertisers did a really good job. But actually, those are the foods that started having all the processed, all the fats added, the hydrogenized fats. Those are the foods that had all the carbohydrates that are really food stabilizers, that aren't complex carbohydrates to help us out. And yes, it allowed us to be busier, but it really got us away from whole foods. And so this is kind of going back to before when processed foods were so readily for me. Now I think of processed foods, or I think of quick foods, as going to Trader Joe's and buying the vegetables that are already cut up. That's your fast food, right? Or going ahead and sometimes they already have cooked meat. There's a lot of cheats, and you could buy, have quicker meals that is fast without having all these processed foods. So what is a healthy, heart healthy, consistent carbohydrate diet? It's a balanced diet with whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and lean proteins. So by lean proteins, I mean proteins from animal products. So that could be, proteins from plant-based sources like peas or beans, legumes, tofu. And then also, if you do have animal products, the lean, like chicken without the skin, we're talking extra lean ground beef, or just the very, very lean cuts. We prefer to stay away from red meat, but if you want to have it like once or twice a month, that's okay. I think it went down to, okay, so in terms of saturated fats come from animal products. And it's interesting when we think of fats, and I'm going to do a brief overview of the cholesterol thing here. Our bodies make cholesterol as part of normal metabolism to digest fats. So we need cholesterol, and part of cholesterol in our body when they do a full lipid panel is triglycerides, total cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, you get that from plant-based foods, or LDL cholesterol from animal products. So our body needs those things. But the problem is our bodies make all that it needs. So when we eat another animal, animals make cholesterol also to digest their food and digest their fat. So we make our own as part of healthy metabolism. We eat steak, and in that animal fat, we're eating someone else's cholesterol. Now, the human body does different things. Since my body makes its own cholesterol, I may naturally genetically make too much. So then that puts me at risk for heart disease. Or, so then I'm already getting too much, or I'm not, but then I eat another animal's cholesterol and I'm getting more. And it's an abundance of what I need. We don't know why some people's bodies process excess cholesterol well and why some people's bodies don't. We don't know why that is. But we do know that in civilizations across the world, the civilizations or communities that have longest living lives have very low LDL cholesterol. We know their LDL cholesterol is less than 70 in the healthiest populations. When in our country, we say less than 100 is fine, or less than 150 is fine for some people. So we know as a whole that it's better for us to stay away from animal products with fat in it. And that's going to help. It helps reduce cancer, but it also helps reduce heart disease. And if we do have those foods, it's a once in a great while food. It's not an everyday food. So where do you find the fat from animals? You find it in whole milk, or any kind of milk with fat in it, in ice cream, in yogurt with added fat, with fat that comes in it, marbled beef and pork. That's the hardest thing with beef and pork, that there's marbling throughout the meat. So it's really hard to get a totally lean beef or pork, where most poultry has minuscule amounts if you're not eating the skin. So that's why turkey and chicken is safe, and fish is terrific. And then of course, butter or stick margarine, you want instead of that. This says reduced fat whipped margarines or liquid oils. I'd rather have you just have olive oil or canola oil, organic, or avocado oil, and stay away from the other oils. And then, although for people who do not have cholesterol issues or heart disease, coconut oil can be healthy. It is a saturated fat, and you know, because it's hard at room temperature. And so that's not something that you want to have a lot of. And so the next, if you want to go down. Thanks, yeah. So the other thing is avoid trans fats, and trans fats are hydrogenated fats. Sometimes I see this in peanut butter. 100% peanut butter or almond butter, it's really great for you. It's a plant-based fat. We need plant-based fat every single day in small amounts. But in order to go ahead and stabilize it, and also because the oil goes to the top, to add hydrogen and mix it up, because it helps it stay mixed, mixed up together. So watch those cans of almond butter and peanut butter, because they may have added hydrogenated fat. So you do not want foods with hydrogenation or added trans fat. I'm really glad that most restaurants have taken trans fat and shortening off their menus, but I know there's still some, especially in bakery products. Okay, and so if we go down here, I think we kind of already talked about this one. So, whipped butters or liquid spreads, or I just prefer oils. Fish and seafood is better than beef and pork. Poultry is kind of medium. Poultry without the skin is best. And then as opposed to chips and crackers and all those snack foods that give us too many carbs and it's hard to balance the carbs, go ahead and have a handful, small amounts of nuts or seeds, nut butters, hummus with vegetables, and avocado. Avocado is a great plant-based fat. I have never maintained my weight better than now when I have small amounts of plant-based fats throughout my day. I always have a small handful of nuts with my breakfast. At lunchtime, I always have either avocado or some kind of oil or something on my salad, a healthy oil, and the same thing with dinner. And so it's really good to have a small amount of plant-based fats throughout your whole day. So if we go down to cholesterol, it's really looking at not having more than 200 milligrams of cholesterol a day. And cholesterol, again, is found in fat from animal sources. So you want to try and omit that. And eggs are great. The yolk itself has cholesterol. And so if you do have high cholesterol difficulties, you probably don't want to have more than 3 to 6 egg yolks per week. But you can have egg whites and mix it with a whole bunch of vegetables, and it's just so good for you. And the next one. So then the thought about consistent carbohydrates. So where do we find our carbohydrates? We find our carbohydrates in grains, in starchy vegetables, beans and legumes, milk, soy milk and yogurt, fruit and fruit juices, and sweets. Often I look at someone's plate and the whole entire plate will be carbs. And so you want to make sure you balance that your whole plate is not carbs, that maybe half your plate is non-starchy vegetables, a quarter of your plate could be plant-based proteins or lean proteins, animal proteins, and then not more than a quarter of your plate carbs. It's okay for, if you're not going to be active at dinner time, just to have a protein, some plant-based fat, and some non-starchy vegetables. You do not have to have carb choices at every single meal, really depending on your activity level. But if you're not doing anything the rest of the night, you don't necessarily want to go ahead and add a whole bunch of carbs before you go to bed. And the next one, going down to the slide here. And I think a lot of this is just kind of a repeat. This is just some great food choices that are high in soluble fiber. Again, it's the fruits and vegetables. And then we already talked in the slides about the refined carbohydrates. And then we talk about low sodium, and really for unless you have heart failure, we think that the best thing to do is about 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day. If you're in more end-stage heart failure, they may say to go as low as 1,500 milligrams a day. This is only a couple teaspoons. We do not need a lot of sodium. Sodium was added to our diet in excess when, again, we started eating those processed foods in the 70s, when we started having the TV dinners and the boxed rices. And so we do not need all that salt. And so because of that, it's important if we eat more whole foods and not processed foods, we're not going to add as much. And then there are hundreds of different herbs and spices we could use. We've kind of gotten reliant on sodium, and when it adds more flavor, when we learn to use those other tools, garlic and chives and even celery seasoning. I'm not celery salt, but like celery seeds. So just practice seasoning without salt, and salt and sugar. So those simple sugars and also the salt, it's really taste that we develop over time. So when you grow up with those processed foods, or as your body gets accustomed to having salt and sugar, our body will crave salt and sugar. We're biological beings. We start craving whatever feels good to our body. And sometimes we have to detox ourselves and try and get rid of those things out of our body. And then our body eventually will adjust to not needing salt and sugar. I continually just struggle with sugar. That's the tough one for me. And what's on the bottom of that here? Okay. There's some tips for seasoning. I use a lot of, that's okay. That's this lemon juice. There's a lot of great tips for seasoning without salt. And if you want to go down further. And so, and also part of that whole thing is weight loss. If you have prediabetes, the recommendation for weight loss is 7% of your body weight. And even right now, if you know that you're overweight, and if you know you have heart disease or heart failure, you do not have to get to what we call the ideal body weight that none of us have ever weighed, probably since we were children. But right now, I think the goal is about 7%. So for some of you, that might be 10 pounds. For some of them, you might be 15 pounds. But that is really your goal, is to go ahead and lose towards that amount. And progression with diet is not perfection, it's progression. So you have not failed when you have a birthday party and you have a piece of cake. You have not failed. You fail when you don't go back and start your healthy plan that's healthy 80% of the time. So these handouts have some great recommendations for foods recommended, and there's also foods not recommended. And I think many of you know this, but please review the handouts, because you might get some ideas of how, what kind of foods to choose. I don't like it that people come to a dietitian and we always say what not to eat. I want you to know what you can eat, and that the menus are really great ideas of what you can eat. And then there's a sample meal menu you could fill out as well. So that's the completion of our topic today, which is really carbohydrates, but also keeping a consistent carbohydrate diet and keeping a heart healthy diet as well. Is there anything new that you learned today?
It was a great review, and a few things new, but the one thing that I keep puzzling about, and it concerns milk. It was recommended that you go to low-fat milk or non-fat, so, but they have added salt, and I have to be very, very wary of salt. And, I went back to whole milk because I don't drink that much. I usually put it in a morning beverage, maybe half a cup a day, and I figured that the less salt would be better than the less fat in terms of the rest of my diet. But I'm amazed that I don't see why they have to put salt in things like milk and cottage cheese. It drives me crazy, but then again, I'm not a nutritionist.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it's a stabilizer. I know that cottage cheese has more sodium than milk does. And typically I have not found though that milk is really the area where people go over with sodium. So if you have heart failure, well, then your recommendation for sodium intake is going to be anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams per day. If you just want to have more of a healthy diet, the recommendation is 2,400 milligrams per day. And so typically if people drink milk, I typically don't see that tips them over. I typically see that from either adding salt in meals or processed foods or frozen meals is where I see people go over.
Okay.
And yeah, and you have to kind of balance because not everyone here has heart failure and not everyone here has coronary artery disease, right? So if you don't have coronary artery disease and your lipid panel has always been great, well, then I'm not so worried about you using whole milk if you're only having a quarter cup every morning for your breakfast. So it's really finding that balance that's really appropriate for you. There's not one thing for everybody, right? So, if someone has, cholesterol of 270, and they're drinking whole milk and they're having a whole cup every single day, I would say that's not really the best choice for you. And so it's finding the balance. And some of us, I know I only drink lactose-free milk because of my stomach difficulties. And even with that, sometimes it's recommended that you don't have milk at all because of some of the other ingredients in milk, not just the lactose. I've been making my own homemade almond milk. I was purchasing almond milk, and the only one that I could find that was only almonds was Simply Almond. And I feel like a couple of years ago, I could buy soy milk or I could buy almond milk and it would just be soy. But now more and more, I'm looking at these containers and again, they're adding fat to it, hydrogenation, they're adding sugars to it, they're adding stabilizers. And I think it's because alternative milks are so the rage right now. And so that they're mass producing them and making them more shelf stable. So I do not think a soy milk or almond milk with a whole list of added ingredients is healthier than a cup of non-fat or low-fat regular milk. I think a lot of it is in the food processing. So just like gluten-free, when I was starting to go gluten-free, I couldn't find a cookie anywhere, which is really good for me, So, but now there's gluten-free products everywhere because they say it's healthy. Well, there's processed gluten-free crap everywhere you go, A similar thing is meatless meals. So they have the Impossible Burger. The Impossible Burger has more saturated fat than some regular broiled burgers, especially if you grill it and you get an extra lean burger. Look at the food label on an Impossible Burger and look how much saturated fat's in there. And people are thinking it's healthier. I'm like, no, just go ahead and don't have a fried burger. You have a grilled burger from low-fat meat. And so we need to look at the concepts that it's not just the food is healthy in itself, how it's prepared and how it's preserved is probably the most important thing you look at.
I have found that starting to read labels has made a tremendous difference. I mean, it's amazing that for so long I never looked at labels, and now I'm looking at them regularly, and I'm just amazed at how many products are not good for you, even in things that say healthy.
Oh, or natural, right?
Or natural, yes. Very much so. So I am so glad I have put so many foods back because the labels are this long, or some of the first ingredients are not ones that I really want to choose.
Yeah, no, definitely. And at Easter time, so I wanted a horseradish. I love horseradish with my ham. Okay, something I don't buy all the time, but Easter comes along or special occasions, I want my horseradish with my ham. And so I was amazed. So there's a jar that looked like gourmet horseradish that looked fantastic. I turned it over and it had addition of high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah.
So out of the 6 choices, there was only one that did not have high fructose corn syrup. And that wasn't the one with the cute label. The ones with the really healthy labels were the ones that actually had all this added stuff to it. And it was this brand that I'd never heard of that when I look at the label, that was actually healthier because it didn't have additives. So
yes,
look for that. Look for added sugar like dextrose, inulins, other stabilizers, other forms of carbohydrates that are added.
And oils, different kind of oils.
It's very easy to make your own horseradish, my dear.
Yeah, I need to look it up because I'm sure that it is. I've always purchased it and I've never made it myself, and I just need to do that. I do make my own, ketchup's pretty easy to make, so I've made that before. I make my own buttermilk. That's pretty easy to make, but I've never thought about that with the horseradishes. So I need to plan ahead.
That you didn't. I'm just saying, as a person who grew up with the mother who made horseradish every year for Passover,
Yeah.
and it was far better than I don't think I ever tasted, commercial horseradish since well into my, half century.
Uh-huh. Well, the real thing always tastes so much better. And I just think that with the Industrial Revolution, and we had the ability to purchase foods that were already prepared, then we became so busy, we don't have time to prepare these things, right? And so I think that's what it is. So now we have to be really diligent about making what we can and what's best for us, and then finding healthy alternatives for the foods we don't have time to prepare, So I now make my own almond milk every single week. It is incredibly simple. I mean, you can look it up online, but I'm just surprised, and it's delicious. And I just take almonds, you buy the raw almonds, and I buy it at Costco, or you buy it in the bulk aisle. You could get organic or non-organic depending on your budget, but you put them in water, and I buy 2 to 4 cups in a bowl of water, and you soak it for at least 4 hours. Often I soak it overnight. And so then it makes that skin really soft, and also the almonds absorb some of the water. At that point, if you want to use the almond meal for baking, you go ahead and take the time and actually pop the skins off each one, and I've done both. And then if I pop the skin off, well, then I put it in the freezer and I have the almond meal to bake with later. I often don't do that because it's a lot of extra time. So I put about 1 to 2 cups of almonds in my blender with 5 to 6 cups of water. And some people do 1 to 5, but I liked mine thicker. So I put it in there. You can but it does add carbs. You could add 1 to 2 dates in there if you want it a little bit sweet. I sometimes add cinnamon, or I'll add the organic stevia, or I'll add something like vanilla extract or something to give it flavor if you want to. So then you blend it really, really well. And, just keep blending and blending and blending. And then you get a cheesecloth bag. If you go ahead and go on Amazon, and if you put almond milk bag, it's the same bag you use to make cold pressed coffee. So then you take a bowl, and you pour that mixture in there, and the meal will stay in the bag, and then the almond milk will drip out. And I just squeeze, and then I have a bowl of almond milk. And it is absolutely delicious. It takes less than 15 minutes to do, and I'm not paying $5.99 for 32 ounces of almond milk, and so almonds are expensive, but you get a lot of almond milk compared to the amount of almonds that you use.
Thank
So
you.
you're saying the almond meal comes from the nuts that are left in this bag after you've squeezed all the moisture out of them, and you take the skins off of them just so that the skins are not part of the almond meal.
Exactly. The skins are not part of the almond meal. And then I haven't done this yet. I was busy, so I just froze mine. But if you go online, it will say to put the almond meal in the oven and dry it out.
So that's kind of like flour, right?
Exactly. And then it becomes almond milk for baking. And I made some delicious like almond milk cookies and for example, I used some almond meal macaroons the other day. It was just almond meal, and it was cocoa and coconut. And then I think it was stevia that I used, the organic stevia, and it was really, really good.
And obviously you could do the same thing with cashews or some other kind of nut, right? It doesn't have to be because you see other nut milks out there.
I'm not sure if there's a different process, and I was wondering that. I wasn't sure if there was something about the almond itself. I don't really see walnut milk, though, for example. I haven't seen that.
I've seen cashew, and I've seen sunflower, maybe.
And I know there's sunflower, definitely the sunflower.
Yeah.
And so I haven't seen the cashew, but that would be really interesting. Cashews are more expensive, but that would, I've thought of that myself. I know you could also make your own soy milk, but it's just a lot more labor intensive, and I'm not into that. I need something easy. I'm too busy.
Right. John's not here today, but he actually makes his own. he does amazing things. His own tofu out of soy.
Oh, I would love to hear him how he does that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and interesting in terms of like, because it was on carbohydrates, if you make your own sourdough, you know, so sourdough bread, I guess is much healthier for you than other breads, even when it's not whole grain, because it has some of the probiotics and everything in it. So I want to make some of my own sourdough. And if it's homemade, even if you're gluten-free, you're supposed to be able to tolerate it. So we'll see.
All right. Thank you so much, Margie. This is great.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much. Always
very
good to see
nice.
you all.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank
So if
you.
you have any topic ideas for next month, let Linda know, okay?
Thank you very
Have a
much.
great day. Take care.
And I will definitely share her handouts.
Great.
Okay. See you guys.
Yeah.